welcome to When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast, a podcast born out of my own personal experience of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma as a caregiving professional. This podcast showcases both lived experience guests and also guests who are in the field of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma, including myself from Burnout Psychology Support. It's all about sharing the wisdom that we have, whether it's the lived experience guests or it's the expert guests, sharing our wisdom so that you, the listener, can gain that wealth so you can either help yourself or be able to help others who are going through this. Just a word of caution as well. Everything that is shared in these episodes are for educational purposes only. They are certainly not a replacement for evidence-based therapy support. It's something that myself, I still engage with it, but certainly when I was in the thick of my burnout, engaged with, and a lot of my other guests. So I really encourage you to do so. So thank you so much for listening. And don't forget, if you like an episode, hit like. I love hearing from you. So comment away or definitely subscribe or follow so you stay up to date with episode releases. But thank you so much for being here and take care of you. Bye for now. Hi, and welcome to this episode of When Burnout Becomes Reality, where I'll be answering the question, am I burnt out? I'll also touch upon other co-occurring conditions such as compassion fatigue, or otherwise known as empathy fatigue, and vicarious trauma, which is also often used or labeled as secondary traumatic stress. So I'll also touch upon those too. But answer this question, am I burnt out? That I know a lot of people are asking themselves. And whilst there's a lot of information out there, it can be overwhelming as well in trying to consume that and make sense of that for yourself. So I'm hoping in this episode today that you'll go away with that information. Before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge that I am making a few changes with the podcast. One, I'm hoping to do them more regularly, doing them fortnightly. And I say I'm hoping to because I'll monitor how my wellness is going as I increase that workload. So watch this space, but I feel ready to do fortnightly. Also, I will keep doing my lived experience guests as well. I think we learn so much from hearing other people's stories of and experiences of burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma. So I'll keep doing that. And also, I have been interviewing expert guests who work in the burnout field, and I will continue to do that. But this is where the change will be. I am going to show up more in that space because, well, I am an expert, a psychologist working in this niche area. So yeah, I'll be doing more of those episodes, but certainly I find a lot of value on connecting with other professionals in this area and learning about how they work with and can help as well. So that will still happen too. And I'm hoping to shorten these episodes a little bit too. I tend to go over. And there'll still be longer episodes at times, but also some short but sweet episodes as well. But love to hear from you, the viewer. So if you have any feedback, always open to it, what you're finding beneficial, what you'd like to see as well that you haven't already. Anyway, let's get into this episode's topic, am I burnt out? Now, way back when I was going through my burnout, I actually went down this rabbit hole to answer the question. Well, the question for me is, what the hell was going on with me? But I had some idea that it might be burnout, it might be vicarious trauma, and it might be compassion fatigue. I can't remember how I was making that connection because these weren't sort of readily recognized back when that was happening for me, and it wasn't something that was in my repertoire as a psychologist and as a human. Burnout was starting to sort of be heard of and understood, but yeah, anyway, I can't remember the connection, but I started to look into these things and answer this question. So back in those days too, I actually would write journal about things. So I did record this knowledge and have gained a lot of knowledge since. So I'm going to go back to these notes, and this is a little bit of just a little bit of a plug of my book, by the way, too. Nothing Left to Give: A Psychologist's Path Back from Burnout, which is my journal. I turned my journal into a memoir. And so I'm going back to the journal entry there, which was called Burnout, Compassion, Fatigue, and Vicarious Trauma, which I recorded on 6th of May, 2021. So yeah, if you see this book I'm holding, that's just where I'm referring to. So am I burnt out? So what I want to share with you here is the common symptoms, the common signs that we notice that could be indicating we're burnt out. So I want to share them with you now. So the first one I've listed here is negative attitudes towards work, life, and other people, or like a cynicism as well. So this is not always in someone's burnout, but can be. And for me, I was finding there was definitely more of a negative attitude, or almost like feel like almost like a giving up or a giving in or despair, maybe even for me, in that way. And there was definitely more of a negativity that was showing up as getting frustrated and more irritable with other people where I wouldn't have been before. Not necessarily, sometimes clients, not outwardly to them, of course, but just getting frustrated internally. And that was more about my own stuff than them, but also in my personal life as well, and colleagues. So anyway, yeah, so someone, yeah, and it could be showing up in that way for you. So that could be a sign. Another sign, and this one's a big one, and actually is the World Health Organization, who has listed burnout as an occupational syndrome in the diagnostic manual for psychiatry and medicine. They indicate that this is a primary one. So exhaustion, fatigue, and I've listed here despair and hopelessness. But sorry, in the WHO, at the World Health Organization, it's that exhaustion and fatigue. I just want to, so this is a very predominant one, and everyone I've spoken to, everyone I've worked with, this is the primary one. And it's often described, and I think someone recently described it as a soul tired. We all get fatigued and tired at times, but it just creeps into every essence of your being. So soul tired, I thought, was pretty damn accurate. So yeah, not just, get tired, good night's sleep or a holiday cures that. That's not burnout, or not significant severe burnout, but exhaustion, fatigue. And I definitely felt that one. For me, it was like waking up every morning already tired, and that bone, I called it like sort of mind, body, spirit tired, and no amount of sleep. And I was sleeping okay. My sleeping, it was disrupted, but not, I was still 8 hours, it was just a lot of dreams, a lot of stressy dreams. So it wasn't great sleep. But anyway, but every morning I was already exhausted, and nothing was seemed to help, not even sleep. Yeah, that other one, despair and hopelessness. So for some, things could be that bad that there just isn't a sense of, they're not feeling a sense of hopefulness of the future, and that sort of giving up, despair feeling as well. And that was, definitely, I was, feeling quite hopeless, feeling like there wasn't a way out. I already mentioned cynicism, which I've separated here. So I've seen this in other people where they're just quite cynical about their work, cynical about the company, where they haven't been before. Emotionally and cognitively distancing self from work. And this could also just be in life too. So other words that often are used here is detached or disconnected. Like there just seems like there's the ties are cut from what you're doing, almost like you're going through the motions. Yeah. There can be a lack of empathy. So that is our ability to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, basically see things from their perspective. So our empathy can be quite drained. Reduced work performance. That one's been understood quite probably using the wrong word there, but or can't say the word. But yeah, we do see that productivity does decrease in a worker when they're burnt out. So yeah, and that's not due to any skill deficit or knowledge deficit, but energy deficit, which burnout is an energy deficit. Increase anxiety and stress. So I mentioned, I might not have mentioned already, but burnout is a chronic stress syndrome, chronic, consistent elevation of our stress response, what we're born with, our fight, flight, freeze response. So we're chronically elevated into that, which we're not designed to be, and leads to all types of troubles, which we're talking about now, but other types of troubles as well, which would be another pod, the impact of burnout. But yeah, our anxiety and stress levels can certainly be high. So things like, anxiety presents quite, differently in everybody, but our body signs are things like sweating, heart racing, shortness of breath, rapid, shallow chest breathing. It can be our mind constantly on things that we're worried about, that we're stressed about. Difficulty regulating, like being able to step back from those thoughts. So increased anxiety and stress. Also, depression and low mood is something that we can notice as well in burnout. And I was definitely, and I feel I was on the brink of actually meeting diagnosis for clinical depression, which people who are burnt out can be at risk of. But it may not get that bad, but we still notice periods of low mood and that depressed symptoms as well in burnout. And that's that, like, despair and hopelessness is often qualities of depression and can bring our mood state down. Even chronic levels of stress will put our body into a low mood as well. And just as a side note, there is a woman, and with your menstrual cycle as well, that week before in the PMS range, and I'm not an expert, by the way, in hormonal stuff, those are other professionals there, but that can be, especially when we're burnt out, even a trickier time where symptoms could be even more elevated due to the hormonal changes during our cycles. So that's something to be mindful of. Irritability and anger, we could be noticing these partners a lot, and I certainly recognize this. My partner picked it up a lot. He said, "You're so irritable," and I hadn't noticed that, and I wasn't quite happy when he mentioned it. But when I stood back, I acknowledged that yes, this was in fact the case. It wasn't a predominant sign for me, the anger, but that can be for other people too, because when we're in that constant fight, flight, freeze response, one of the predominant feelings in fight is that anger. So for some people, that could be more of a strong representation. For me, it was more anxiety and that low mood. Sleep disturbances, as I mentioned before, and that can look very different for everybody. For me, it was very active sleep, very stressy dreams, which is not great for your quality of sleep. It was like my mind was trying to make sense and process the emotions of the day and prepare for the next day, never having enough time to really properly process the emotional and mental load I was carrying during my day. Things are different now. But it can also be difficulty getting to sleep. It can be frequent waking during the night, and it can also be early waking in the morning and not getting back to sleep, or all of those. It can also present as a lack of motivation and passion. I hear a lot of my clients say, there's just no pleasure, there's no passion anymore. Or any interest is the other thing. And just, my motivation to do anything and everything is just not there. Also, this next one as brain fog. So our cognitive capacity, so these are things like recalling, long-term, things that happened in the past, but even short-term, like where the hell did I put my keys, which still happens to me even though I'm no longer burnt out. But lack of concentration, decision-making, focus. Now, the reason for this is that, again, that chronic stress state. Our bodies are designed when we're in that flight, fight, freeze mode to activate the parts of us for survival mode. Things that, primarily are there to basically don't get killed. If a lion is showing up in our environment, we don't want to be sitting there going, okay, well, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? We don't need our decision making. We just need to either fight that predator or get the hell out of there. But often our chronic stress states aren't caused by a predator right then and there. So our responses in those moments to be in that chronic stress state and not helping us to be able to combat the type of stresses we're actually facing. So that lack of concentration, memory, and brain fog is due to that elevated and chronic activation of our fight, flight, and freeze response, our stress response. Withdrawal from others. So we might find for some people, and I did this because I just had no energy, and a lot of my burnout came from the interpersonal exchanges and the emotional and mental load I was carrying from working as a psychologist one-on-one in therapy, seeing lots of clients. I think there was about 80 to 100 clients on my books at the time. So I was withdrawing from others, and I didn't see it at the time, but that was me conserving energy. But it meant not getting, the energy benefits from connecting with my friends and family outside of my work. Withdrawal from others can be another sign. Also, another sign is physical signs. Because we're in that stress response to fight and flight, our muscles tense. So there can be a lot of physical aches. There can be headaches as well, nausea too, and even low libido as well, our sex drive. And the emotional fragility, but which just means is that we find it hard to regulate our emotions. We might find ourselves crying at a drop of the hat, or once we do start crying, not being able to stop it. And that's a constant one I hear, and one that happened to me as well. So there you have it. Those are, and it's not necessarily an exhausted list. There may be things that I've forgotten there, but they are the common ones. And actually, a few just came to my mind as I said that. The other ones too that are important is a sense of lack of achievement, sort of getting anywhere, like feeling like you're not achieving where you were before, and also a lack of confidence. There might be a lot of self-criticalness and self-doubt that's dropping in, particularly in relation to the work that you're doing, the role that you're completing, that wasn't there before. And that was a big one for me as well, and one that the World Health Organization do identify as one of the symptoms that are characteristic of this. Okay, now I'm mindful that I wanted to keep this short, but I also want to share with you the common signs and symptoms of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma if you're interested as well. And I do, even if you think you might not be, I really encourage to listen to this part, because just to be aware, because there are crossovers as well. Anyway, so compassion fatigue. So sharing this. I just want to share you the notes that I wrote in my journal. So compassion fatigue is a close cousin of burnout. I discovered that compassion fatigue results from continual exposure to trauma and the emotional stresses of others. So the actual so I often find, and what I've experienced since to compassion fatigue or empathy fatigue, that it's often referred to as, it's resulted from the continual energy that you put out there to hold space for people who are experiencing lots of trauma and stresses in their life. Like, I feel like I need to backtrack a little bit here, that one of the things we do as clinicians is provide a compassionate space to hold and really witness and hear. And that takes a lot of emotional and mental energy to provide that empathic, compassionate environment. And when we overuse it, because we're human, we can fatigue. So hopefully that's making a bit more sense there. excuse me, my nose. So the signs of compassion fatigue that that could alert that you're experiencing this is sadness and grief. I'm just going to wipe my nose. Sorry about that. So sadness and grief is a big sign of this. Avoidance or dread of working with some clients, some patients, reduced ability to feel empathy towards patients or families. Somatic complaints, so these are the body complaints again that I mentioned earlier, because our bodies are not detached from our emotional and our mental experiences. Our emotions are experienced through our bodies, so it can be showing up in ways in the body. It can be things like, this is where it can be tricky, is this burnout, compassion fatigue, but I'm just like, well, we both. People with bowel issues as well, or stomach related issues. Also, it can show up as addiction as well. And again, burnout can too, as a way to sort of self-medicate and to deal with what we're experiencing, that one can be fueling themselves with substances. Nightmares. I mentioned to you that I had quite vivid dreams where it was usually something to do with work. It wasn't necessarily, or what I was facing with clients wasn't exactly, but something, created the same sort of emotions. So, and for some clients, it can be quite terrifying, nightmares, actually almost living the experiences of their clients. Frequent use of sick days, so noticing, and again, this can happen in burnout as well, we can notice this, but needing more days off. That was happening to me a lot and for some time prior to burning out. Increased psychological arousal, so that's that anxiety, stress, always being in that fight, flight, freeze response. Changing in beliefs or expectations or assumptions, so experiencing constant exposure to other people's traumas and stresses and holding that space to them can start to shape or change your worldview, how you see things. I remember I've had quite a sheltered upbringing in terms of exposure to suffering was very minor, and I'm very grateful for that. Until I was in front of clients and hearing the absolute darkness of human life and what a human can go through, and one of the shifts in beliefs that I noticed, or I don't know, but like, I never thought that I would feel such anger or even despair or even hopelessness about sort of the changes, or even trying to stop these sufferings from happening, or even anger at the person who caused the suffering. It certainly altered my worldview. So yeah, just a little bit personal there. Detachment, as we talked about in the burnout, feeling quite distant or even dissociated, sort of it's basically a protective factor that because being connected into that work is creating such a drain on your resources, that your body kicks in there to move into a place that can hopefully help you survive there. So we can become quite detached from our work, from that empathy, with that person. And also the decreased intimacy as well. So in our relationships, we might find ourselves distancing and detaching as well. So as you can see, it already can get a little bit confusing as how do these differ. And I try not to get too caught up, because there's no point in the labels and stuff. Just, it's more important if you notice that you're experiencing these symptoms, rather than getting caught up in, is this compassion fatigue, is this burnout? It doesn't matter. It's the symptoms are more important, and the reason why they're there, and then the work to help so you can of course, not experiencing those symptoms anymore, and move towards more of a place of wellness. So, but yeah, but those are some of the signs of compassion fatigue. And let's finish off with exploring, am I experiencing vicarious trauma? So I'm just going to read from my book journal entry again, just the start here. What I learned about vicarious trauma is that it is the consistent engagement with traumatic material of people who have been or are currently going through traumatic experiences. So the signs of vicarious trauma are, and you can see that, how people could be experiencing all three of these, because compassion fatigue or empathy fatigue. So it's working with vulnerable others, holding that compassionate space that takes energy. It's an emotional, mental, and physical load that I haven't mentioned before. And, that when that's overused, when that resource is overused, that we start to become depleted and experience some of those symptoms. And that can also contribute to those burnout signs as well, which, those emotional exhaustion, detached from work and things like that. You can see that crossover there. And then with vicarious trauma, it's exposure to other people's trauma, and the effect that can have on us. So let's look at those symptoms. Hopefully this is making sense to you. So what we can notice here in vicarious trauma is experiencing lingering feelings of anger, rage, and sadness about the patient, the client's victimization. I definitely experienced that. And I think I mentioned that before when we're talking about that changing in beliefs and expectations. Becoming overly involved emotionally with the patient. That happened with me. Experiencing bystander guilt, shame, or feelings of self-doubt. That one, not so much for me, but definitely, but the self-doubt, my ability to help. Being preoccupied with the thoughts of clients, patients outside of the work situation. Me, constantly worried about them, and some more so than others that are in quite difficult, ongoing trauma and unsafe situations. Definitely. Over-identification with the client patient, having horror and rescue fantasies. For me, and I've seen this in practice as well, that out of that want to help and the want to, that I don't know if this was rescue fantasies for me, but like going over and over, trying to find a way to support them and making sure that you're covering everything. So, and I suppose the reason I think it, and I think this was quite unconscious for me, I wasn't conscious of the time, that I was fueled by an over responsibility that I not necessarily rescue them, but it was up to me to help them. And I suppose in a way that was, rescuing, and knowing that that's not in my control, knowing that up here, but in here back then, it was such a pull that I know what's going on for this person. I need to get them out of this situation. So there was that over involvement. Loss of hope, pessimism, and cynicism. The distancing, numbing, detachment, cutting clients off, staying busy. So there's some similarity and crossover with the other ones there, burnout, compassion fatigue. Finding yourself avoiding listening to the client's story, or maybe detaching from it, not really connected there, not really in that zone. And difficulty in maintaining professional boundaries with the client, such as overextending yourself, trying to do more than is in your role or your responsibility to help that client at that time that they're with you in your service. So in trying to keep this short as well, I'm hoping that sharing this information that I have gathered over the years and through my own experience has helped answer that question: am I burnt out? Am I experiencing compassion fatigue? Am I going through vicarious trauma? Now, as you know, as I mentioned, don't get caught up in the labels. If you noted symptoms under all of those or some of those, that's something, and they're affecting your functioning, they're affecting your ability to go about your day, go about your working life, go about your relationship, social life, go about any parts of your life, then that's a sign you need help. And please reach out. It's here at Burnout Psychology Support, the service that I run, that is Australia-wide telehealth, which is online counselling, and also face-to-face in Brisbane is available. But there's a load of therapists out there working in this space, so please go get the help that you need. And I hope that this information has helped in some way to recognize what might be going on for you, or maybe you're someone out there helping others who are experiencing these, these conditions. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and take care of you. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of When Burnout Becomes Reality podcast. If you liked it or have some feedback or observations, please hit like, please comment. And of course, to stay updated with episodes released, please follow on your favorite platform, your podcast provider. And please, if you're finding you are struggling or someone you know is, please help them, help yourself connect with a professional who can work with you in this space and help you towards your wellness. I can't stress that enough. I did that myself. We're not meant to do things on our own. So please link in with support. And if you are here in Australia, or if you're local in Brisbane, where I'm from, please reach out to Burnout Psychology Support. I'm now here for and helping people going through burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma, those caregiving professionals out there. So please get in touch. I feel like I've got that help is on the way from what's that movie? Forgotten that movie. Robin Williams, though. Anyway, thank you so much for being, for listening. And if you are a follower, thank you so much for following us as well here. But take care of you, and bye for now.